Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences.
Get on with it.
Thanks to Asmodee for the review copy of Legends of the West, Ticket to Ride Legacy. Oh boy. Have people been wanting me to give my thoughts on this, and I've already heard some reviewers' thoughts on this, and obviously, as expected from some of them, there's been a lot of 9s and 10s being thrown around with the whole, this is amazing, fantastic, it's amazing, you're gonna love the experience. Well, you know me, I tend to not put too much faith when hype suddenly starts being a big thing, so I figured I want to try this game because, as you know, I like Ticket to Ride. I don't love it like the best game ever. It's an 8 out of 10 for me. Some expansions make it a 9, but I've got the whole Ticket to Ride stuff in the other room, and I do really enjoy it. I can play it with the parents, they understand it, they love it, and I love playing it with the UK expansion, the France expansion, the Japan expansion, you know, those particular things make me enjoy the game. But I do recognise that it is a bit of a luck fest. It is a gateway game at the end of the day, you expect that sort of thing. And playing the base versions of Ticket to Ride, I'm kind of like, meh, I can sort of deal with them. I always want to use an expansion. And when it comes to legacy games, I'm a little bit not as keen on them as well. I mean, I've enjoyed some in the past, but they've always had problems. And by the time you get to the end of the campaign, you kind of just want it to end. Now, I have not played Clank Legacy. I've heard that's really good, but then I'm only kind of meh on Clank, so I'm not desperate to play it. But I have played some bad stuff in the past. I mean, who remembers Seafail? Seafall, you know, remember that game? And I've played like a couple of the other ones that have just not been great. You know, Charterstone was technically meant to be Legacy, but that was literally build yourself a boring Euro in 12 easy steps. That was pretty much all that was. But the real legacy game that is the champion these days is the Pandemics. I've played Pandemic Season 1, I've played Season 2, love them both. Season 1's definitely the best. I am playing through Season 0 at the moment, we're up to September, and I am enjoying Season 0, but it is taking a little while to get going into the good stuff, I must admit. I still think Pandemic Season 1 is probably the best of the lot.
I beg to differ, sir.
But when it comes to legacy games, I have a theory with them. That legacy really mainly works when you base it on a system that's already known and in place. So Ticket to Ride, that works. Pandemic, that works. But I also feel that legacy is best suited to co-op games. Because, well, I'll explain reasons as I go through this review, but I do think that co-op legacy games infinitely work better than a competitive legacy game. And, you know, the Pandemic Legacies are still the most popular legacy game that has been released. So, well, I don't know, do you call Gloomhaven a legacy game or is that more of an RPG? It's hard to tell, but, you know, certainly I think more people, not just the big niche groups, you know, love the Pandemic Legacies, and I can see why. So, you know, 3 designers, Rob W., Matt Leacock, and Alan R. Moon, 3 people who know what they're doing when it comes to Ticket to Ride and legacy games. Is this a match made in heaven, or is this completely overhyped? So this video is going to be spoiler-free 99%. I mean, there's going to be the occasional bits revealed about the start of the game, but I'm not going to talk about bits that are revealed during the game other than how the game feels. If you want to hear me talk about specific aspects that I liked and didn't like from actual unlocks, then check out my spoiler video for that one. Do not watch it if you don't want to be spoiled, you have been warned. So, Ticket to Ride Legacy has you do 12 games fixed, no more, no less. And for the most part, it's basically Ticket to Ride, as you know. Get the train cards of different colours with the locomotives, play them, get routes, score points. But there's a few little tweaks from the get-go that you will notice compared to a normal Ticket to Ride. Firstly, you have the event deck. Now, I'm not going to reveal the actual events, but basically, these green event cards are a separate little deck where, as a certain card comes out of the train deck, you reveal an event and it's either an instant thing or a while visible, this is an effect. So these contain things that will, you know, somewhat, you know, get in the way, or they will, you know, they might hinder you, they might help you, but they're sort of weird, wacky stuff that tends to happen. You're also not gunning for points in this game as much as you are gunning for money. You effectively own a rail company, and this is the rail company that you will have for the course of the game. This rail company is, if I get it out of the box, essentially is a big box like this. So this will contain all your stuff. You'll pick one of the 5 colors. This is what you'll have. It will have a vault and an office in it, which is basically 2 separate slots, which is quite a cool little design. And the idea is that once things go in the vault, it's only for the end of the campaign. You don't touch it ever again. If it goes in your office, it's basically stored between games. But this is basically your sort of holding box for lots of different little bits. But the idea is that as a rail company, you're out to get money. Money is the victory points in this. You start off with a few. You might have to pay money at times to do various things in the game, but for the most part, you will earn money by doing various actions in the game, or more to the point, you'll get money for the ticket. So you're not getting points, you're getting money. But there is also endgame scoring for having fewest trains remaining, and there's a scaling bonus for that. But there's also coins, as I said, you'll earn during the game. So effectively, in each game, you are looking at the coins you have in hand, the tickets that you have claimed, and also your amount of trains that are left scaling bonus. Those 3 will make up your individual scores in a round. But then as you go from game to game, various things will change from the board. The plot will expand itself, the board will expand, because you effectively get given like what looks like one piece out of a jigsaw puzzle to begin with, and then the person who came first in each game can basically pick one of the new locations to essentially open up. And this is not a spoiler, they're in the box, but you know, here's the Florida box. So you can basically say, you know what, I want to open up the Florida location. So you get the board, you get the box, it opens up, new mechanics come into play, the map expands, and this will happen over the course of the 12 games. There is also a new type of card called postcards. These effectively are, I'm not going to show them, but it's essentially another type of card that you can earn during the game based on what tickets you claim. These postcards have various different bonuses or other ways to score points, but you don't necessarily know what's on the postcard until you get it from unlocking stuff in the game. So it's one of those things that if you do well, or if you go for certain things, you'll be able to find more of these and carry them over from game to game potentially, or work out a way to stick them in your vault for more end-game scoring. There's a decent amount of these, and these also do something to semi-forward the plot. Some postcards are related to that, and some are just random bonuses that you can grab. As with every Legacy game, components get destroyed and the board gets amended. So you will have stickers that you will put on the board in various ways to change up tracks or change up city locations, but you will also have to retire stuff out of the game. So tickets that you have to begin with might not necessarily be in the game by the time you finish. Depends how often you claim them. But those sort of things you know from the get-go. This is kind of obvious from the very start. But you will play through the 12 games, going through these different mechanics, expanding the board, and playing effectively 12 scaling games of Ticket to Ride. More on that a bit later, but essentially the games get a little bit more involved and a bit more longer as you go through. Once you get to the end of the 12 games, there is then a final points tally for everything that is in your vault, as well as what happened in the last game, and essentially the most points, if you care at that stage, is the winner. We're skipping the whole similar games thing on this one because frankly, if I did, we probably would start going into spoilers at that point. But from a good perspective, this is definitely a fairly easy Legacy game to get stuck into. You know, if you already know how to play Ticket to Ride, which by now you should, you know, it's easy enough to literally just go, oh yeah, that rule's the same, that rule's the same. Oh, here's the slight little tweaks, and get going with your first game. You grab your company, grab the little bits out, you read a couple of the extra rules, but for the most part, you will recognize your first game of Ticket to Ride Legacy as pretty much a Ticket to Ride game. Then as it starts adding new bits in, you just got to cope with those extra parts. Ticket to Ride itself is not a complicated game anyway, and even when this starts throwing lots of other stuff at you, it's not particularly complex, and so you should be able to get into this relatively straightforward. Do I recommend it to anybody who's not played Ticket to Ride at all? I don't know, I think they might be on the back foot, but if we're going to talk about any Legacy game where you could just go in straight new, you probably could. You know, if you've got somebody who's used to games and just hasn't played Ticket to Ride yet, you don't desperately need them to have played a Ticket to Ride game first before they play this. Certainly you'll probably want to show them a normal game of Ticket to Ride afterwards, but I don't think it's mandatory, and that's a good sign. It means that the barrier to entry to this one is a bit lower than would be for a lot of other Legacy games.
I don't get it.
The map expanding is probably one of the better aspects on the unlock side of things. Again, I can't talk much about the unlocks without going into spoilers, but the boards coming out and expanding the board is probably one of the cooler aspects of what gets added, because it's not entirely deterministic. You know, the idea is that, yes, you know, you can go one of 3 ways maybe at a time. You know, do you want to go to this one, do you want to go to this one, or do you want to go to this one? Well, that's up to the person who won the game. So if you win the game, then great, you get to pick which one of those goes out first. But then what order you do them in can have an impact on how the game will progress, and it can create a kind of weird board. I mean, you can try to go nice and linear, where you try and go, right, we've got this one, let's do this bottom one first, and then we'll do this one and this one, and then that one and that one, and go to the far end. But you could feasibly literally just go across the top and ignore the entire bottom half of the board. So you already end up like at the left-hand side of the states and the right-hand side, and you haven't even touched the south. It's perfectly doable, because all you've got to do is just choose that one as you go through. So you can create a really weird setup for your board as the game goes on, and that I found to be pretty cool. I think when we did it, we took it more of a boring stance to it, where we were a bit more linear, but I dare say you could create some weird wacky looking boards as you go along if you were to just be a little bit more haphazard with it. Production wise, this is not a cheap game. It is £75 online typically, and whoa, that's quite a lot of money to pay. But if you're going to split that between 4 people to play a legacy game, which is something that you can commonly do, that's not too big a deal. But still, you are talking 20 quid per person. It's not cheap. But you're getting a decent amount of stuff in the box. I mean, you've got your plastic trains as normal. So yes, you're not using the fancy trains from, you know, the 10th anniversary set. You are using the plastic ones as you've done before. Although, if you've got those like those really cool special ones, I forget who, the train rail, I'll have to get it and put it on the page, but you know, if you've got those fancy upgrade trains, they work in this. So you can use those with this game and you can have fun with those. I certainly did for the most part. Eventually you'll run out and you'll need more trains, but more on that later. But everything else in here, I mean, you've got a lot of these different tuck boxes for the various locations. You've got your, you know, special company boxes. You've got, you know, a big like holding box full of the cards. This is just a lid, I don't want to spoil, but you know, big lid on here with a lot of cards that are in the game. You know, the box itself is certainly going to be a bit of a storage nightmare, but you've got quite a lot of boards going into it as well, and some of the unlocks, particularly an early one, is cool. You can see that jacked up the price a little bit by putting that in, and it's quite a cool gimmick, but it's a fun gimmick. You'll know what I mean when you get to that one. It's pretty early. One big problem that we encountered, if you already thought Ticket to Ride was quite a lucky game, like fairly lucky, some bout swings, that kind of thing, like, oh, I claim tickets and I just happen to have the route, therefore I get points. If you thought that was bad in Ticket to Ride, oh my word, are you in for a treat with this one, because this takes it to another level.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
The randomness and swinginess that can happen in this game is off the friggin' charts. And a lot of people mention this and seem to gloss over it as if they don't mind. That's fine if you're playing a really short game, but the games of this tend to get quite long. As you go through the campaign, you start off playing a Ticket to Ride game in about 30 to 40 minutes, but sooner or later they start taking anywhere like 90 minutes plus. You know, we're talking rails and sails levels of the amount of time it takes to finish the game, and there's a reason Rails and Sails, well, there's several reasons why Rails and Sails didn't do very well. An extended time length was one of them, and by the end of the game you're adding so many trains per game that the game just sort of drags on and on and on and on. But the swinginess comes from primarily 2 things. Firstly, those postcards. The balance on those postcards is ridiculous. There is stuff in those cards that just trivialize certain aspects of the game. Like, I had one that some mechanic came out and it hurts people from time to time. One postcard I had completely nerfed that entire thing for me for the entire campaign. Never did I have to worry about it. One card. But it's also the fact that these cards can score you points very easily. I mean, it's like 12 points for this, 12 points for that, and what have I got to do? Oh, just connect that route and add a locomotive. What, that's it? Well, that's easy. Fine, 12 points. And they are based on a rich get richer thing, because it's not like, oh, everybody gets a prize. No, you have to seek these postcards out, and typically if you've done well in the game, particularly with tickets, that's how you primarily get the postcards. So I didn't get very many of them in the whole game, whereas one player got tons of them because he just grabbed a few, did really well, they gave him really cool and powerful abilities in the later games, and by getting powerful abilities, he got richer, and it's just that plays out as well. But oh my god, I do not like this event deck. This event deck actually, I think, spoils a lot of the game for me, and some people have mentioned, you know, mixed opinions on this, but the events can be really painful at times or really beneficial, but entirely based on luck. I mean, let's for example say that, certain color becomes wild, right? Okay, great. My hand is full of the color that isn't wild though. Oh, it's okay. Somebody was saving up 5 of that color already. So now they have 5 wilds in their hand by sheer fluke of the event. And it's not like there's a shortage of events. I mean, you start off with not that many, but as you go through the campaign, that deck gets quite big. Yes, you retire one at the end of each game, but that's not enough. And frankly, we just I won't go into that, I would say that in spoilers, but you've got a big deck of those events, and some of these things that hurt you in the game or benefit you in the game are based entirely on an event coming out of that deck. So you have to, in order for some of these things to go away or actually be worth their weight in money, I guess, you have to have them in the game, then you have to put them in the event deck, then it randomly has to come out, and then after it comes out of the event deck, somebody has to act upon it before it gets replaced with another event, which could literally be the same turn if they're shuffled into the main train deck that way. So, one mechanic we had could have potentially gone away at some point after a few games. It remained for the entire campaign because we saw the event that related to it twice. And it was acted upon once in that time. These events and the postcards and everything just create a system in this game where by the time you get halfway through this campaign, you just don't care who wins. And if you play this seriously to the point where like, oh right, I'm out to win, let's see if we can see who wins this one. It's like, there is no skill in this. The skill factor is so low, it's pretty much just play through the 12 games and see who comes out on top. You don't really feel that the guy played exceptionally well or anything like that, because a lot of the times things could have literally just come out to help you. I, in one game, had a particular setup where an event came out, it completely killed my early game. One event that I couldn't have expected to come out of a deck of 25 cards. It came out early, screwed up my early game, and I missed out on key things in the game that I was aiming for because it nerfed me so bad. And there's just other aspects of this, like there's one particular bit of board which has a random element in it, and if this random element can nerf you in various ways, but you need to go through it at times, but it's random as to when it nerfs you. So you might go through it scot-free, but then at other times you might get hit with some really painful thing that's a nightmare to get rid of, and again, it's all random. And this just, I don't feel like I have a lot of agency over stuff in this game. I feel like I'm just playing my Ticket to Ride game and occasionally stuff is being thrown at me. It's like you're playing a board game and occasionally objects are being thrown at you, but you don't know what objects they're going to be. One day it's a brick, one day it's a beach ball, the next one it's a crab. I don't know, but at some point this stuff is going to get thrown at you and you just kind of have to accept it. And I don't know if I was willing to accept it for that price and the fact that it's a competitive game. Playtesting for this game also might have been a little bit done on the little wayside, because we had combinations in this game that were just straight up overpowered. And I can't say too much for spoiler reasons. I will definitely say it in the spoiler video though. But we had one combination of literally just a board plus a card element, and those two things together are not an uncommon thing to happen. I dare say it will happen in every single game somebody plays of this, and somebody played it, and based on the rules that were written, bearing in mind this has not been out long enough to have an FAQ errata for, it broke the entire game. One game of this could literally have been rated a 1 out of 10 in its fun factor, because it literally broke it. The player was able to steamroll the entire game. There was no way we could beat them, and we just had to accept it was pretty much a write-off. Let's get to the next one. That is not a good thing to have in your 12-game campaign, that one of them can literally just break by literally 2 things being in the same game. Now, maybe we played it wrong, but because there's no errata and no way to clarify it, because the rules weren't written well enough for the thing, we didn't have any way to go about it. Maybe we could have taken the more prudent view and said, nah, I can't do that. That seems a bit too beardy. But with the rules as written, that's how it worked, and it just broke the game. The unlocks in this also aren't that interesting either. For the most part, there's a couple that I liked, but they are so fleeting when they come out that by the time you've gone, oh, that's really cool, it's literally done with as soon as you remember it.
And it's gone.
Pretty much. You know, you get this one mechanic, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool, and then after 2 games, it's done and dusted, it's all gone. And then you find another mechanic, it's like, oh, that's pretty sweet, yeah, and then after a couple of games, it's gone. And then you find one mechanic that's really cool, and it's gone in 1 game. Like 1 game and it's done. So a lot of the cool stuff this game throws at you is so finite, you wish it would carry on throughout the rest of the game. So what are you left with from game to game that is consistent? Mainly what you get on the boards. But a couple of them are cool, but some of them, as I mentioned before, are just nerfing, they're bad, they're not designed well, and there's little incentive to make you want to go to these boards, because most of these other boards will have more stuff on them, they'll have stuff that's worth a lot of points, it'll be more familiar, and you don't have a chance of being screwed over by it. Whereas these other particular boards have elements that say, oh yeah, you can come and do some long thing, but there's a fairly good chance, or a complete random chance, that you'll be completely nerfed and you really didn't want to go here. So what incentive do I have to go to those locations when I might as well just stay in the others? The problem is, if you draw tickets at the start of the game and you're stuck with those locations, you have no choice but to go through them. And at that point, you're on the back foot compared to somebody else. Again, randomness and balance, it's all swings and roundabouts here, except I don't think there's an exit to the roundabout, and the swing is just literally going all the way around the swing. It's like there's no chance to get off it.
What the hell are you talking about?
Now, there's technically a plot of the game, and you forget it's a thing after the first game. It really is that bare bones. I mean, there is so little of a plot in this. You know, the plot is revealed by the occasional legacy card that you read where it says, read this before your game and whatever. But it's rinse repeat. It's just the same stuff that tends to get unlocked at the start of every game in this. And usually similar stuff that gets unlocked at the end are the frontier boards, which basically add something maybe a little bit cooler. But yeah, the legacy deck of cards is pretty bare bones and just keeps rinse repeating the same unlocks, and the story, you just don't care. You know, there's somebody in the background and they're doing stuff while you're doing stuff, and it's like, whatever, we honestly don't care. It's not immersive, it's not interesting, it's just completely in the background. And in our game, we nerfed this NPC effectively so hard that it was basically trivial. They weren't even a threat. You know, they thought, oh yeah, they can expand and do stuff. No, they weren't. Not with the game we were playing. I mean, honestly, the person who won our campaign was more of a threat than the NPC was from the get-go. And that's, you know, come on. I mean, I know that legacy games don't do a good job of pasting a story on, but the Pandemic Legacies at least try to put a half-decent story on, and, you know, you're at least interested in what's kind of going on, even if not to a full extent. Here, you could literally take the story out of the game and it would make no difference. It is that much of a who gives a flying
John Spartan, you are fined 1 credit for a violation of the verbal morality statute.
When you get to the end of the campaign, you're not going to care who wins, because the points in this are so inflated. It's a minor spoiler, but it's not saying much, and come on, you kind of need to know this. The point values in this are inflated like crazy. You'll get a point here, a point there, and you'll think, oh, that's pretty cool, and I scored this much in the game. Until you realise that when you get to the end of the campaign, you are scoring somewhere between 800 to 1,500 points or something. I mean, you could score 4-digit levels of points here. Do you really care whether you got a couple of points from something earlier on when you realise that that's the kind of endgame total? Now, this comes from several sources, but not that many sources. And by the time you get there, you've already called who's going to win, who's going to come second, third, fourth. At no point did I think, oh yeah, it's going to finish like this. I thought, yeah, this is going to be who's first, second, third, and fourth. I called it, I got it entirely right, and again, no surprises. It just, you know, you want it to be like a, oh my god, I can't tell, this ending's going to be cool, and it's not. It's kind of abrupt, it's very anticlimactic.
You silly sod! What? You got us all worked up!
One of the things about legacy games is typically you take the box and you chuck it away, you don't really care. This one, much like the Pandemic one, says that you can play the game at the end with your own personal Ticket to Ride map here. Yes, that is technically true, you can. But would I want to? Not really, because you end up with a map that is probably way too big for what a typical Ticket to Ride map should be. So it's going to be rails and sails levels of time, length, and randomness, which you don't want, because that is not a good, you know, that was one of the worst Ticket to Ride products put out, rails and sails. But also, the stuff that you end up with is not that dissimilar from stuff you've seen before, it's just slightly tweaked. And honestly, I'd rather just pull out a normal Ticket to Ride game with one of the better expansions than I would this, especially when this takes up so much space on your shelf. There is no reason to have something this huge on your shelf for just one variant of Ticket to Ride. So as soon as I'm done with these reviews, this lot is going in the bin. I am literally sticking it in the recycling bin. I have no intention of playing this at the end, and I don't think many others will either. So I think that's all I can say without going into spoilers, but honestly, Ticket to Ride Legacy is a bit of a disappointment, and I'm not getting the 9s and 10s. I seriously am not. You know, sometimes I can think, oh yeah, I can see why people would enjoy this, but I can't see how you would forgive the staleness of some of the unlocks, the lack of any climactic fun with the end of the campaign, the randomness, the swings, that event deck. I don't know how you can just gloss over that and say this is 9, 10 out of 10, fantastic enjoyment. Because it just frankly isn't. This game is fine at the start. I enjoyed it a lot more as it began, but as it went through, it started getting worse and worse to the point where I was feeling almost a bit sorry that I managed to get 3 friends of mine to play 12 games of this.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
I asked people what their ratings were for the game. One person said 8 out of 10. They enjoyed it, they had fun, they acknowledged the flaws I've mentioned, but for them it didn't bother them as much, so they gave it an 8. Fine. The person who won it, I think, gave it a 7, so they thought it was good. The person who came last gave it a 5, so an average rating. And for me, it's hard to say, because it started off being more enjoyable, and there are some aspects of it I do like, but when I have to consider the game as a whole, like, is this worth £75? Is it worth committing 12 games of your life to this? Is it worth are the unlocks worth it? Is the story worth it? Is the gameplay still fun? And really, the gameplay is fun to an extent, but only because I like Ticket to Ride. But that's not exactly reinventing anything here. You already have Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride is already great. So I can't give you brownie points for getting the Ticket to Ride aspect right, when the rest of the game felt very lackluster. At the time around that table, I was giving this a 5 out of 10. I think overall, I think this is below average. When you consider everything in the box, what this could have been, but the wild swings, the complete imbalances, the lack of any care of the plot, the lack of any care as to, actually being competitive in this game, and the fact that it goes to rails and sails territories of being too long, too swingy, and just too much, and some of the punishing aspects that can kill you, kill your entire game by random luck. That stuff's not enjoyable. I'm giving this one a 4 out of 10. It's below average. And some of you are going to think that is incredibly harsh, but I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. I don't recommend this game. I would instantly play the Pandemic Legacies again rather than play this one again. This is not one I want to play again. I know what happens. I know it's not amounting to anything, so there's no reason that I would want to play this as a finished component, nor play it as a second playthrough. You could convince me to play a Pandemic Legacy game again all the way through, because the system works better. The fact that this is competitive, I think, kills it. If they tried to make this like a Ticket to Ride co-op game, I think that would be interesting. It would reinvent the wheel. That would be really innovative and different. But here you've just basically got Ticket to Ride, where occasionally they throw in little tweaks, most of which you recognize from expansions you've already seen before, and it just doesn't work in the long run. So that's it for me on this episode of Broken Meeple. Don't forget to thumb it up on YouTube, and also thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the site. Let's get it in the hot review section. I'm pretty sure it will get some blowback from some people, but some of these reviews do when you have a contrary opinion to other people. But by all means, check out all the other content I've been doing, everything from Cutting the Horror to Nucleum to Age of Innovation to Evacuation. I've been doing a lot of big name games lately, and hopefully you've been enjoying the content, and there's still more to get through besides. This was certainly a mission to get this done in the 12 games, but, I'm at least glad I tried it, but, I'm just disappointed at how it turned out. But until next time, remember, regardless of whether this is going to be a new staple in your collection, or one that's going in the bin, it's still only a game. Bye for now, everyone.